You know, it's this tremendous event and something very special. My family started going, my father actually I guess went in 1966, and then the family went in 74, missing the 78 tournament. My first World Cup was in 1986, so I'm coming up on number 8 for World Cups, and that's always shocking to people when we travel that you know, early on in these World Cups, it was not very commercialized and not very well known. Sort of over the last 2 or 3 is where it's really picked up popularity, especially from an American standpoint. But for me, it's the best memories of, you know, being with my family and going to unique places and learning about them. In '86, to go there, to see it, to experience it, it's so enlightening, if you will. Sometimes I feel like, you know, we're very blessed to live in the best country in the world, but sometimes our perspective is a little bit limited to not understand. As Americans, we take a lot of things for granted, a lot of our freedoms, our liberties, those things, and you go to, you know, countries like that and you see it, and they had the earthquakes before the World Cup, and it had caused a lot of damage, a lot of suffering, a lot of hardship, but that the country rallied to put on a great event and something very special. Fortunately or unfortunately, my greatest World Cup game to date was the Brazil-France game in Guadalajara, which is widely considered the greatest, one of the greatest World Cup, you know, matches of all time. And it broke my heart to see Brazil eliminated. 1986, I went into it sort of wide-eyed, didn't know what I was getting involved in. But by the time, you know, you go 1990 to Italy, that's probably my favorite of the World Cup trips, less the U.S. performances, and I'll never forget going to those games, and there were very few American fans there, very few, and we got a lot of awkward stares and a hard time with people. They had a hard time understanding that Americans cared this much about soccer, and we were cheering hard, and it was, again, not a great performance by the guys, but they got in and they started that streak. But 90 was my favorite because it was 35 days in Italy, and when do you ever get 35 days of your mom and dad's attention? And you know, this is sort of pre-cell phone and computer, and Dad didn't know how to use a cell phone or computer, you know, later on either. So I was in really good shape in 1990, and I got the opportunity to have them show me a country that they love, and it was special. I mean, Italy did well in the tournament, and so you had all the people behind the team, all the you know, the Italians there supporting them. So it was a great tournament. You know, some memorable moments. Also, never forget playing in the Ducal Gardens there, 2-on-2 game with my brother against 2 local Italians. One of which was they were probably about 17, and my brother, you know, being at that time, so 1990, he was going to be, say, 25-ish. He and I played, and one kid was at AC Milan, but we played, and his buddy couldn't, the Italian, the kid from AC Milan, his buddy wasn't very much of a soccer player, so my brother and I took him there on the pitch at the Ducal Gardens, setting the bar high for U.S. soccer. We did win one game, and they were so disgusted with it, the fact that two Texans had beaten them. Dad, along with Jim Graham, were the heads of the host committee for Dallas to get the World Cup, and you know, I really think that was one of these changing moments again for soccer in this community. You'd go back to the Tornado, the first professional team, and sort of the legacy of soccer over time. But you know, everybody, when you go to a World Cup now, knows that Dallas hosted a World Cup, or was a World Cup site for games, and that stands out. It's a really interesting thing. I found that you can talk about, you know, where teams play, and they'll say, oh, that was in Dallas, or you know, that was in Washington D.C., or that was, you know, in, you know, Berlin or Munich, you know, whatever World Cup it was. So it really is, you know, Dallas was a famous show, and I will tell a funny story about Dallas. Every World Cup we've been to, we say, oh, we're from Dallas, and everybody hums the theme songs to the TV show Dallas to us, which is one of the most, you know, remarkable things that a TV show has that kind of presence worldwide. But it was great for Dallas. Dad getting it here was a big deal, and Jim Graham, who's done so much for soccer. For me, '94 was special because I got to be a ball boy at the South Korea-Spain game at the Cotton Bowl. They took from the Dallas Classic League 2 kids from each team to be a ball boy, and so I got to be on the field, do it. A very unique experience, and you Dallas lucked out too, having the Brazil-Holland game, which was a 3-2 victory for Brazil, which warmed my heart, although I do love the Dutch teams too. But Dallas got one of the best games of that tournament, maybe one of the best games in the history of the World Cup. It's interesting because the Cotton Bowl is an older stadium, but Dallas did a great job. It put its best foot forward. The stadium, I mean, people really enjoyed themselves, and it was interesting. I mean, I tell you, the game that stands out to me is the U.S. game in the Pontiac Silverdome against Switzerland, and as long as I live, I will never forget that game. We were in Detroit, and it was probably about 100 degrees, but with the grass field in there, and with them watering the grass field, we all would escape at halftime. We all walked outside. We would rather be in 100 degrees. There was a greenhouse effect in there, and I'm sure Fernando Clavijo has told you about that, but it was one of the most unusual things where, I mean, you couldn't stop sweating. My dad joked till the very end that no Swiss person would ever go back to Detroit because they would say it is the place where they play the hottest game. and that was one of his good laughs of the tournament, and I will never forget sweating like that and actually physically walking outside because I knew it was going to be cooler outside on the 100-degree pavement than inside. Yeah, you know, it's hard growing up and explaining that, especially going on these trips and leaving, you know, for a good part of your summer, and you don't talk to your friends or whatever, getting a pre-cell phone, pre-computer. It was hard for people to understand. And, you know, as I was getting older, getting ready to graduate high school, club soccer was really taking off then. But even, you know, in 1990, it was still, none of my friends played soccer, and eventually I had one or two playing high school soccer, and then obviously I had my club teammates, but I didn't go to school with them. So yeah, it was hard for people to understand you're going where to see what is what I got. Now today, your friends, you know, I have friends dying to go to the tournament, which I think is just such a fascinating shift, you know, here in 2014. You know, people trying to plan an opportunity to go see games. You know, it's sort of one of those, you talk about it events or the thing to be in, that's what the World Cup now is. You know, that's where it's gone. I would tell you that the Olympics was much more the thing to go to, and whatever the cycle, 84, which I was there in the LA games, watching Carl Lewis run, which was pretty spectacular. But I would tell you that the World Cup, if not is equal, may be ahead now of the Olympics. And so, you know, the fans, I would tell you, they've changed in that I think all classes of people who can afford to go. That sort of would be my impression of it. Is I think it was limited to certain groups within different countries, and now I think it is just that popular that all people want to go, male and female, which makes it great. And the Women's World Cup has contributed to this. It is a wonderful international event that really has opened, I think, the door and made, you know, the men's, you know, World Cup even more popular.